Well, one of our users in California is moving from hand drafting to drafting with gCADPlus, and he has a couple of questions. The first is, how would you draw that grassed area using gCADPlus? Well, the best tool to use is the polyline tool. That's found, of course, on the draw menu and polyline. You want a series of straight lines and arcs, and that can be done with the polyline command. I'd suggest in this instance you'd come down to the status line here and make sure that the polar switch is on, because what that means is that if we pick the polyline command, and let's start it at about this point, I've got my drawing colour set to red, and notice that the polyline at the moment is dropping straight into the arc mode. I can right click and pick line mode and then come over here and then right click again and say I want to go now into arc mode, and I set the arc. Don't concern yourself with the fact that the arc that we just drew doesn't quite match your intentions. Now we go line again and come down here, and notice that line is nice and vertical. Right click into arc again, come across to here again, pay no attention to the fact that we're not quite the way you want it. Right click, go into line, come over here and into arc mode. So I'm just right clicking each time I need to choose. So I'll click here, and this time I'm going to stay in arc mode because we need to be finishing the arc somewhere here and another arc reversing back, so we can come and use our object snap tool and pick that one and right click and close it. So we now have a closed polyline, and at this point we can just tweak things a little. Just click on the arc there, that last arc, drag it into position, and if you want to do any other fine tuning you can do just that. And I'll pan up. Maybe we can improve on this one, and we're done. So we now have, let me click away from it, unselect all, we now have a shape that we can fill with grass. This tall tree here will of course hang over the top. The next question he has is, how do you draw like a hedge symbol or some ground cover symbol? Well, that's best drawn. We're going to produce something like this one here or that one there, and we can change the colour as I've done here by setting the transparency to 200. But that sort of shape is drawn using a tool called the cloud tool, and all I need to do, I'll zoom in a little, I'll start my cloud, and then the midpoint of the arc and the end point of the arc. Now midpoint of arc, end point of arc. I'll do a short one and maybe another short one. Now a longer and shallower one. Come in here and like so. So I'm just setting the midpoint and the end point of each one, and I'm just varying, if you like, the depth of that individual bit. So here, now I want to jump back to the end point, so I'll O-snap to the end point, and we are done. To make that into a polyline, just wrap everything, select everything, and then just join them together, and there it is. So again, we could, if we needed to, we could fine-tune a little bit more. But I would then set a colour. Let's make it 54, and we would set a fill. You could have a border if you wanted to, and so I'm making all these changes in the properties box, and we could set a border colour, say to 251, and we'll unselect all. So now we have a dark shape ready for indicating some heavy ground cover or hedging planting. So you can make those sorts of shapes very, very easily. You can see this one I've made by making larger arcs than I did here. To change its colour, just click in there, and as we did earlier, just make that 150 or reduce the colour intensity, and there we are. The edge of that is set with a 0.3mm pen, which is much too thick for the moment, but at least you could see it. Now I've reduced the thickness of it, and you can move these into position. So hopefully he's able now to draw a grass shape quite easily. We'll take the colour away, and well, we can just make it green, and we can fill it. And let's see what we get when we reduce the transparency to something like 75. Do we get a reasonably nice colour? Not sure we do. To me that's still too intense. So what do we get if we go to 25 and unselect all? That's good. Let me move it so that you can see. And whoops. Move from the midpoint, and we'll pop it down there and escape. Well, we'll probably come halfway between those two extremes, maybe 40, and unselect all. And you can see one can play around with colours. There are other things you can do to give it a more interesting appearance, putting gradients and point shapes in there. But hopefully that answers the two questions. How do you draw shapes like that grass, and how can you do a ground cover symbol on the fly?